It's insane how much video games have impacted my life. My job is video games. Gaming is my hobby still. The communities that are formed through this medium have the ability to link the most unlikely of people together, forming a sense of camaraderie, a community. And it's even more crazy when all the people in the community you join themselves were part of this even grander scale thing. Hearing people talk about their favorite game is almost always followed by, it's my game because of where I was in life. And look, legendary film critic Roger Ebert said, video games aren't art. And of course I don't agree with him, but honestly, a part of me thinks they aren't either. The people who play them are. Flipping through GameFAQs, shitposting on MapleStory forums, and watching Mario Bros. Z on Newgrounds helped me feel connected to others and wanted to create my own stories. Have you ever heard somebody talk about their favorite game? It's fucking incredible. I've seen people get absolutely furious because they can't convey their love in words, or they completely lose themselves in these long tangent about talking about their favorite game. And that brings us here. This video is not about my favorite game. This video is about the favorite game of most of my friends. A game series that has so clearly impacted them to their core that it has fundamentally shaped who they are. A series that during this time of isolation has inspired many, myself included, to pick it up. A game that itself is the embodiment of excitement. A game that sometimes you and the Thamers need to kick back, have a beer, soda, joint, or glass of refreshing water and say, this is special. And finally, I get why none of the people I've met over the last 2 years would just shut up about this game. In a series that has stood the test of time to the point that a December 2019 tournament crowdfunded over $10,000 in prize money for a game that is 20 years old. Let's take a look at a legendary series and why so many people continue to pour their hearts and souls into games that have long since lost their developers' support. So let's talk about it. I suck at Spider-Man, and this is why Marvel vs. Capcom is staying hyped.
Stay tuned for a few golden words from our sponsors.
Jump back. It's 1990. George H. Bush is finally getting voted out of office for all those quote-unquote silly war crimes he committed. David Lynch's Twin Peaks has begun airing, and banning of ivory trade was finally in full effect. And out of the gate, even with the lack of ivory that we all know is needed to make video games, something magical happened. Fighting games exploded. Everyone's slamming their quarters down to get their spot in the queue. There's 30-year-olds losing to 12-year-olds who are rushing to the arcade after school just so they can play the hottest game possible. And people fucking loved it. And the absolute king of fighting games is a little company you might have heard of. They're called Capcom. Capcom, a company that would become an absolute juggernaut, would give birth to some of the most iconic mascots of all time while coming into their own, having shifted focus in 1989. See, Capcom had started his life as two separate companies. IRM Corporation was founded on May 30th, 1979, and Japan Capsule Computers, which were both dedicated to the manufacturing of arcade machines before renaming the latter to Capcom, a clipped compound of their original name referring to what they called their machines, capsule computers. And that also came how they viewed their own software, a capsule packed to the brim with fun. And they would publish their first arcade machine, Little League, in 1983 too. Very little reception. Like, seriously, this is all I can find on it. It's just one sentence. They would push forward, having some success in the arcades, but it wasn't until 1989 that Capcom saw the potential of home consoles and became entirely focused on software development, releasing hits such as 1942 Commando and Ghosts and Goblins. God, I hate that game. Porting game after game over to the NES, they would be established as the god they are today without two main games. First, Akira Kitamura's Mega Man.
Super fighting robot, Mega Man. Super fighting robot, Mega Man. Super fighting robot,
And second, well, I think you already know what this one is. Street Fighter, created by Piston Takashi Nishiyama and Finnish Hiroshi Matsusumo, setting up Capcom as the gaming king, pumping out hits from DuckTales to Devil May Cry and everything in between. Capcom would go on to be the standard for fighting games, with Street Fighter, Street Fighter 2, Darkstalkers, Cyberbots, Full Metal Madness, and Street Fighter Alpha, all leading up to the birth of the versus genre. But before you can pit your characters against another IP, you need another IP in the first place. Enter Marvel Comics. See, I'm not talking about Marvel, a subsidiary of Disney whose net worth is worth more than most nations. What? I'm talking about Marvel, the company that sold its Spider-Man movie rights over to Sony for a quick buck because things weren't going so well for them. See, Marvel began its life in 1939 as Timely Comics and started dropping bangers as early as 1940, where Stan Lee and Jack Kirby would be killing the game. Look, you all know who Marvel is at this point. And if you don't, please take me to whatever bunker you're living in because I really don't want to get COVID. Jumping forward to the 1990s, the comics industry wasn't great, but it also was. From 1985 to 1993, comics saw more success than ever for comic collectors. People were hoarding their issues of Detective Action and Spider-Man #1, creating the highest time of speculation for comics in known history, where the amount of comics in circulation was completely unmatched, giving prosperous wealth and fame to all those. Then the bubble burst. The mass-produced collectible comics that had been entering circulation and had been hoarded, collections were auctioned off in mass, and as it goes with economic bubble theory, if everyone sells their shit at the same time, things aren't good. Comics fell to an all-time low to the point that Marvel had to file for bankruptcy. I sure hope they bounce back from that! The industry standard had fallen, and after over 50 years of publishing and setting the bar, it was looking like things might be coming to an end for comics. But the thing that really was keeping Marvel afloat at this time were the games, baby. That's right, you wouldn't have your precious Paul Rudd Ant-Man if it wasn't for these gamers working hard. Marvel first struck a publishing deal with Capcom to create a game about the Punisher and White Nick Fury beating up people on the streets, and they were so happy with it that it led to long and beautiful relationship between the two companies. Thus, it began. The Punisher, X-Men Mutant Apocalypse, War of the Gems, Marvel Superheroes the Game, a long line of Marvel beat-em-ups and crossover games creating the assets for the birth of a genre. Now look, I want you to think about this shit as a kid in 1996. You're living your life watching Rugrats, Rocko's Modern Life, Power Rangers, and hoping Ren and Stimpy doesn't awaken anything in you. Don't worry, it will. And you see this.
This is arcade quality. X-Men vs. Street Fighter. Sega Saturn.
Capcom had cracked the code, using old assets from other games they had created in the past to create the cheapest, coolest, and most universally celebrated fighting game genre of all time. You're telling me I can have Ryu fight Magneto with Iceman backing him up and Chun-Li in the back? What a lot of people don't remember is that the X-Men were the shit in the 90s. X-Men comics were booming and finally teaching white kids about the basic core concepts of racism. The series had just been rebooted, and the comic series was seeing a huge shift. And above all else, the X-Men 90s cartoon. So taking the biggest superheroes of the 90s and combining them with the biggest game in the 90s was clearly a no-brainer, having it soar to the heights of being the most successful arcade game of 1996. Because not only did it bring the concept of putting these two games together, it brought in one of the most hyped aspects of another 90s staple into the mix: the tag team formula. The idea of having two different characters that you could play in the same round was something that had been dabbled with before, but wasn't universally understood. But goddamn, Capcom did it! The problem is that objectively being hype isn't enough. The game itself hasn't really stood the test of time. Clunky controls, objectively bad systems, and the characters just weren't there yet. Like, imagine your game being so bad, but the concept itself carries it all the way home to become the highest-selling arcade game of the year. Capcom took this concept and saw it went well, so they went, hey guys, we made other Marvel games besides X-Men, we got all these assets, let's make some tweaks. 1 year later, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighters was released and expanding upon just the idea of X-Men. Their idea of tweaking this game was to take out Charlie Nash and Cammy and replace them with Dan and Sakura. So for the Street Fighter side of Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, there was Ryu, Girl Ryu, Red Ryu, Bad Ryu, and Edgy Ryu. Characters that all basically played the same and had identical moves. The tweaks didn't work super well. Everything felt more like throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what stuck, and the game didn't perform great critically or commercially, getting around the same ratings and only reaching the third most successful game of the year, so it was enough. So they were given another shot. Why not? The games were cheap to make, lots of reusability, and they still sold all right, so what happened next? Well, they changed everything. Come on! Capcom finally hits a three-point windmill dunk. I don't know sport. The stars align, the UI, the style, the music, the backgrounds. Oh boy, the characters. We got everyone you could want. Morrigan awakening young boys and girls. Gambit been making me feel a certain way. Venom looking spooky as hell. Jin from Cyberpunk, who I don't know who that is, but fuck it, he's got a headband and a cape. All the pieces were falling into place. Marvel vs. Capcom, aka MVC, drops on January 23rd, 1998. An expansion on everything that made Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter look cool. 15 playable characters, 20 background characters, incredible artwork, flashy effects, everything a kid could want. And that was just a prototype for the things to come.
When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit.
I wanna take you for a ride. I wanna take you for a
Oh god, I'm gonna... Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is the first true versus game to many people, introducing new and perfecting all the old groundwork to create the staples of the versus genre we know today. Going on to be one of the most successful fighting games of all time with some of the most iconic moments in gaming history. Developers Tatsuka Nakade, Katsuhiro Iguchi, Shintaro Kojima, Oni Suzuki, Shinichiro Obata, and Hidetoshi Izawa, all working together with Tetsuya Shibata and Mitsuhiko Takano's soundtrack to create a stylish, chaotic mess that breaks every single conventional rule of game design. If something is cool enough or pushes the art form even while breaking conventional boundaries, allow it. Have fun with it. And it's the core thesis of why MVC works. And that's why Marvel 2 is so fondly regarded. There isn't a second of this game that doesn't scream chaos or fun. MVC 2 quote-unquote dumbed down the system from the previous Versus game to allow for more accessibility, but ended up creating one of the most beautifully simple but increasingly complex engines that would set the standard for future games in the series. A history that in itself is Marvel vs. Capcom. Justin Wong, Yipes, Alex Valle, Chris G helped cement for the future. For 10 long years, MVC was the standard and undisputed king in versus fighting, and with MVC's mere existence teetering on the brink of oblivion until 2009, there wasn't much hope. For 10 years, they had heard that Capcom had lost the Marvel license. There was no hope to be had, and yet, they still kept playing. Waiting, watching, until they saw it. The Mecca, the Marvel. There's so much I can say about this fucking game intro, and I might make a video on it someday, but god damn. This is Marvel, baby. Showing off characters that had blown onto the scene in the meantime, Dante showing what it means to be cool, Chris Redfield fighting the Hulk, a new comic book inspired cell-shaded art style that looks good even a decade later. The memes, the hype, the glory, MBC was here for a new generation, one that would last for every year of EVO until the next game. And this video isn't about that next game, so don't ask. So what makes a game series originally based around reused assets as a cost-saving measure so exciting? Well, let's break it down. 4 main reasons. The idea of versus series and crossovers in general, embracing the creativity of mechanics of the game, the presentation of it all, and arcade culture with a die-hard community. A local man doesn't know how to fucking make an intro for his script until 14 minutes in. Goddamn. Marvel is worth more than almost anything. Marvel could buy and sell you. Marvel could destroy your livelihood and all art that you hold dear. Marvel is love. Marvel is life. Marvel is everything. Marvel is the universe. And Street Fighter is like the best-selling traditional fighting game of all time, so like no-brainer, I guess. Mashing these things together and introducing Capcom's iconic series such as Darksiders, Resident Evil, Mega Man X, Strider, Mega Man Legends, Captain Commando, Beautiful Joe, Devil May Cry, Dead Rising, Final Fight, Bionic Commando, and fucking Omingo, the greatest fighting game character ever to live? Pretty obvious. Look, thought experiment. Taking established franchises and pitting them against each other in creative and new ways has been a thing since the fucking beginning of documented fiction. Around 150 AD, Lucian of Samosata wrote The True History, a space satire, that's right, Mel Brooks, I knew you ripped this off, with Lucian and his friends pass Cloud Cuckooland from... God, how the fuck do I say this? Aristophanes the Birds. The first cinematic universe-style idea of a long-form continuity was in Honor de Balzac's multi-volume The Human Comedy, where all of his stories shared the same universe and characters. Hell, in video games, Konami's Wide World was a crossover between King Kong, Castlevania, and... the fuck? Mikey from the Goonies? You're fucking with me, right? You're fucking with me. Wizards on deck of Hannah Montana. But it's not just the idea of crossing over, it's being the one in control of these fights is inherently compelling. It's why kids play with action figures and dolls and create the narratives that they do. Fanfiction has exploded to the point where we make multi-million-dollar softcore pornos about it. Do that with some of the most iconic characters in the ever-expanding nerd canon at the time, and you got a winning combination. The Versus character formula has become so successful that Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is now video games the video game. Taking art and applying your own sensibilities to it is one of the most human things you can do. Hell, it's what a lot of people on YouTube do for a living. So when the team over at MBC took their craziness and applied it, it just resonated differently. Created a mess of flashing lights and over-the-top presentation that hasn't ever been matched in fighting games to this day. With Marvel vs. Capcom, you and your friends fight as the heroes, villains, and everybody in between. Taking the sensibility of playing pretend as kids on a playground and applying it to an outlet that we can all socially accept and not get beat up for. They found a way to allow that limitless creativity of children in Marvel vs. Capcom that allows them to embrace crazy in ways never seen before. Yo, kid, come over here. Look.
You want to learn how to do a fucking infinite?
Dying in one hit, off the ground combo, touches of death, infinites, unblockable setup, push block, X Factor, reality stone, triangle dash, command grab plus invincible lariat option select, giant flying Dorito, X Busters charging, flying pile drive, round start 50-50, full screen chip dash, foot dive, DLC costumes that alter hitboxes, a bomb that inverts controller input, bug trap, and a giant suspended wearing mayor hitting you with a pipe. MBC is broken. And not like broken in the way that the game doesn't work. It's not. It works. It's broken in the way that the game works too well. Like a race car traveling too fast for its wheels to stay on the rims. A beautiful flaming ball of death hurtling towards its destination, tearing apart everything standing in front of it, knocking aside obstacles like goddamn toddlers. It's broken because it's just too goddamn powerful. It's a chaotic dance of passion as stupidity. the Soulja Boy of fighting games, if you will. A cacophony of flashing lights, beams, fists, and characters trying to get that one sweet hit so you can kill your enemy in the flashiest way possible. Every MVC player I've ever met has told me that they think their game is bullshit. What if everybody's bullshit? Marvel vs. Capcom's mechanic pool goes so deep that this is the length of a video on the easiest game in the franchise. MVC's Chaos has created a game built entirely around navigating chaos and snatching victory through the storm your opponent creates, which is sometimes literally storm. In Marvel 2, it's always storm. Always. From Just Your Wrong super jumping over and over as Cyclops, to Hot Milkman breaking guards as Firebrand, to Chris Free shooting more fireballs than the continent of Australia in 2019, everyone in MVC has a plan, and everybody has a plan until they get foot dived in the face, over and over, by the best looking doctor we've seen since Dr. Oz. Allowing players to be rewarded for their creativity, their own way of thinking, their own universe. There was such a variety in Marvel vs. Capcom 3's teams that we have never seen in the like of any other fighting games. From big boy teams to zoners to rushdown to goddamn beneath fucking unblockable. Seriously! It was the first fighting game series that really just let you play it your way. Sure, there's a way to express creativity in almost every fighting game, but MVC allows you to truly push your own team and ideas to the limit and perform some amazing feats that you, yes, you, Jim, personally came up with. In reality, MVC, it's like jazz, baby. You just improvise until you figure it out, and then now you have a game plan. And with the ability to do anything cool under your belt, you might as well look cool as hell doing it too. Marvel, with a single exception, looks gorgeous. Handcrafted sprites, beautiful cel-shaded art, and stylish as fuck. Setting the standard for what hype-ass fighting games are gonna look like from here on out. MVC gets how to make superheroes look super. Huge flashes and changes in the entire idea of game flow when you let an ultimate attack rock. Cinematic rules take over and let the game drive itself for a minute because you're fine with it because it looks so goddamn cool. Of course you want to see Phoenix Wright send Sentinel to jail for being a murderer. Fuck cops. It didn't get this way on accident though. Marvel vs. Capcom is beautiful because of some core talent. MVC 1 and 2 had Bengus, aka Mido Shito, aka CRMK, aka Holy Home Run, aka Gouda Cheese, the unknown god of art at Capcom at the time, who created these beautiful backgrounds in sprite art, designing sleek UI brimming with personality, and creating the baseline for the craziness we would see for years to come. Backgrounds exploding, character art popping out at the most opportune times, particle effects so crispy you want to slap them in your mouth, num 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 num. MVC 2 swapping the background to these impressive 3D set pieces of art, over twice the characters, a million more effects, a brand new layout, and the personalities pushed even further to the end. Taking everything that Marvel 1 did with its art and pushing it to the precipice of crazy, MVC 2 looked at it and went, hold my beer. Somehow an entire concept based around saving money became one of the most iconic video game art books of all time, and it's insane. And then MVC 3 though. Departing from the stylish sprite-based artwork, because that's boomer shit, the third installment takes on a cel-shaded comic book-inspired art style, remaking everything from the ground up, and goddamn it looks fucking amazing. Art directed by Hiroyuki Nara, aka Narantia, who originally was an object designer on earlier games in the franchise, and other Capcom titles such as Dungeons & Dragons, Shadow over Mystera, and Mega Man The Power Battle. It wasn't until Monster Hunter Freedom 2 and Devil May Cry 4 that he would start dealing with the characters in motion before they took his 15 years of experience that they had him develop the art style of Marvel vs. Capcom 3. A masterclass in style, with the characters tearing away the background to make it look like the attack was so strong that the comic book couldn't take it. Adding personality with every single movement and attack, and really upping the visual flair of an already chaotic series. MVC can look like sensory overload to those who aren't familiar with it. But I mean, when isn't Marvel about fucking sensory overload? Look at the goddamn... I don't know what's going on. This controlled chaos, this ability to recognize while also looking like an actual scientific clusterfuck is something few games come even close to achieving. A cacophony of clashing images, sounds, and style to all drive the point home. And that point is hype. I'm going to gush just so you guys are going to have to hold this. The character select screen is one of the most overlooked areas of fighting games, and 3 times MVC nailed it, and 1 time they didn't. But by showing off either the art, the feeling of the game, or just the sheer amount of characters. The necessity of style is so apparent in Marvel vs. Capcom that you can even feel it in the music. The music of Marvel vs. Capcom is incredible, and it was all made possible by 3 people. Yuki Takahara, composer of Super Puzzle Fighter, Final Fight 2, The Punisher, and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Heritage to the Future, baby! And Masato Koda, composer of Mega Man 2, the Devil May Cry series, and Monster Hunter. These 2 made everything in MVC 1 and 2. From hype techno beats, from triumphant stage setters, to quite possibly the most iconic character select screen music of all time, every single moment of MVC's music is nothing but love. And shout out to X-Men vs. Street Fighter composer Yuki Iwai for making the Capcom Goof Troop OST. And for MVC3, Takahara and Koda had moved on to different phases in their careers, creating a hole in this giant's chest. A hole that could be filled by only one person. Hideyuki Fukasawa, a veteran composer over at Capcom, stepping into the shoes of his big brothers. And he fucking nailed it! Not only reaching the heights of his predecessors, but also bringing the series into the modern era. The amount of particle effects, crazy movement, the beautiful, beautiful chaotic music, and insanity happening on screen is not only something you can comprehend with practice, it's something that you just experience. It makes a battle of gods, a fight between 2 superpowered individuals, feel like it is. Look, if you want something that looks more realistic, go play Karate Fight for the NES. But if you want this, pop in a copy of Marvel 3 for the personal computer for Parsec and start learning how to do that. It's not like you got anything else going on. You meet plenty of people who are more than happy to teach you the game. And then after you understand, they'll take your money because the MVC community slaps. The Marvel vs. Capcom community doesn't fuck around. When you say their games are dead, Mr. Michael Yipes Mendoza and Mr. Chris Matrix will get all their friends together, set up a Marvel vs. Capcom 2 tournament, and use the hype of their game that is literally 20 years old at this point to crowdfund over $10,000 in prize money and laugh at your ass while they triangle dash around you. MVC's community is some of the most passionate, hype-inducing, and competitive people in all of fighting games. They're loud, they're willing to talk smack, and above all else, they're willing to put their money where their mouth is. But why is that? Because of arcade culture. Look, back in the 1990s, before your coronavirus and your Nazis, arcades were a magical place where I was too young to go to, and I lived in the Colorado suburbs around a lot of white people, so I didn't really get to experience all that. But arcades are where esports were born. There was no Go Home or Watch. There was no LPUCS. There was no Jumpstart first grade math. There were these big blocky cabinets that you and your boys, girls, and thamers would go to after school, drop 25 cents on to beat the shit out of each other over and over until you started putting real money on the line. Arcade culture was different because it was a physical place. Now look, I'm not saying community isn't created by Discord or the internet. Far, far from that. I think some incredible communities have been created that way. But what I'm saying is that when something has its roots in personal face-to-face connection like Marvel vs. Capcom or the fighting game community in general, the culture around it changes. Crowds form. Heroes were created, memes were made, legacies, rivals, tournaments, and above all else, there was no barrier for entry. Video games are fucking expensive. In 1990, your average video game console costs around the 2020 equivalent of $700, give or take. Now, with $60 to $80 equivalent controllers, an $80 game, money for electricity, money for internet, and an on average $140 TV, that's a lot of dough. Now, I don't need to tell you this, but poor people fucking exist. Inner cities, red line areas. When you look at esports like Overwatch, League, CSGO, and Rainbow Six, everybody looks the fucking same because they can play it from the comfort of their own home. For arcade culture, all you need is 25 cents for the bus and 25 cents for the game machine. Bada bing, bada boom, you play and you're there. You're in the thick of it. And hell, even sometimes people will help you out. And it's also crazy how many people were pulled into the realm of comics from fighting games and vice versa. Look, nerds fucking hate each other. It's a psychological phenomenon called horizontal hostility, in which people that are parts of the same grand culture but differ in subculture tend to hate those who are slightly different than them as much, if not more, than those who slightly oppose their beliefs. But Marvel vs. Capcom was able to combine these two subsets of the nerd community in a meaningful way, allowing those who were into fighting games an outlet into comics, and those who like comics as a way to socialize and get their asses kicked by like-minded individuals. But with arcade culture and its roots that have permeated MVC to this very day, everyone is welcome. It showed that kids from all walks of life can love something that's hype if the community poured time into it. It's why fighting games were the first esport, and they were created not by some huge corporation trying to make billions of dollars off League of Legends or Counter-Strike, but from inner city poor kids that couldn't even afford to buy a Super Nintendo. And still, they loved video games all the same. They put together tournaments themselves. They brought crowds. There were the friendships and rivalries and careers that they made on accident that people celebrate to this day. And with MVC3 bringing so many new people into the community in the console generation, showing that the seeds that were planted not only sprouted, they flourished. The community loves their game. They love all of it. The imperfections, the bugs, the bullshit, because it's their game. And when people love their game that much and are willing to dedicate that much time to their game's community and culture, you're gonna feel that love. Marvel vs. Capcom commentators bringing energy that I've never seen before. Because even with the smack talk and the rivalries and the salt, it's all love. Look, I didn't play Marvel. I haven't played it much outside of casually popping in with a few friends, picking it up on sale during Xbox 360 sales, and drunkenly mashing at EVO. I only joined the fighting game community in 2018, and the effect MVC has had on a lot of the coolest people I know is palpable. I made this video honestly because I just think it needs to exist. I've gotten secondhand hype just from being around these people. Met some of my best friends in the world who are huge Marvel heads. The MVC community is this relic of an era where esports were finally starting to show up in the mainstream. Memes that had just penetrated into the internet zeitgeist, and social media was blooming. The tournaments, memes, and players weren't made out of some hope of going pro. It was all made out of the idea that MVC was for everyone, and that playing the game was the most fun way to show your love for it.
And that's why I think the Marvel vs. Capcom community is so special, because their ability to make it for everyone.
A lot of people say Marvel is dead, and I just don't think that's true. People seem to forget that in between Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and Marvel vs. Capcom 3, there was 10 years of licensing hell that made people think the same thing. And while this might be a huge bump in the road for us, hoping to watch Spider-Man chokeslam Dante from the Devil May Cry series, I think people are truly forgetting the only thing more important than what we've heard right now. And that's it's Marvel, baby.
Marvel vs. Capcom is a wonderful, chaotic spectacle that I wished I had been a part of, but instead I have this unique experience of seeing how much love all the people I've met have for the series as the party is over. MVC has had a massive hiccup, but I think people have focused too much on how MVCI was a failure and not enough celebrating the wonder and joy that these games have brought to people. How this legendary series has brought so many cool people, amazing moments, and wonderful content into our homes. How a lot of people can make what all in all is a series of ones and zeros some of the most meaningful, important moments of their lives, and paving the way for so many more esports to come. While the party might have died down a bit for now, I don't think it's too far-fetched to have hope for the future. With Dragon Ball FighterZ and Skullgirls showing there is still very much a market for team fighters, I don't think it'll be too long until we hear those beautiful 4 words that everyone has been waiting for.
Capcom presents Marvel Comics.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. Check out my Twitter, check out my Twitch. Have a good one.